Joe Hawkins lives and breathes landscape. In 2012, he came to Hagley in Worcestershire to take on a new role as head of landscape. His passion is Georgian landscape history. But what a landscape! The parkland here was superb in the 18th century, but since then it's suffered centuries of neglect. The lakes have silted up, and the woods are crammed with trees that have seeded themselves. But Joe had good reason for taking on this challenge. With its sweeping views, Hagley is ranked by English Heritage as a Grade 1 landscape of national importance. The estate's current custodian is the 12th Viscount Cobham. He wants to restore the landscape, and now he has the funding from English Heritage and Natural England to help do just that. We're following Joe Hawkins and Lord Cobham as they struggle to breathe life into a neglected landscape, transforming the entire park and restoring the walks for everyone to enjoy. But will the restoration go to plan? And what surprises lie in store for the team along the way? It's hard to believe this muddy valley can ever be restored to gracious 18th century cascades once again.
Basically, this is the restoration of an 18th century landscape, and it's one of the most important 18th century landscapes in Europe. It's internationally influential. It influenced gardens in the States, gardens in France. There was a replica of the house was built in Russia. Everyone, by the end of the 18th century, everyone who came to England came to Hagley to have a look at the grounds here.
The opening phase of this huge project will take the best part of a year. English Heritage are helping to fund the restoration of the rotunda at the top of the hill, and Natural England the series of cascades beneath it. There's also an important Palladian bridge which Natural England are helping to restore. Many of the watercourses, though, have to be rebuilt.
It's a really influential park, and the reason it's influential and one of the most important landscapes is because it's a landscape that was created by its owner. This was an original landscape. This was made by the owner with his hub of contacts. So largely the area that we're restoring that is down to George Littleton, the first Lord Littleton.
Well, George felt that he had a very special piece of the countryside. He didn't have to create the countryside, and so he just wanted to lean on it. He didn't want a plethora of temples or plethora of eye catchers. He wanted a few eye catchers within the countryside. But the countryside was the god, and the views were the god. So it was not a question of a close view. It was a question of trying to create a landscape with long views, tempered by some tremendous eye catchers within.
James Thompson's season that was rewritten here in 1744 celebrates George and his wife wandering through the landscape here and loving it. So in 47, when she died, he was distraught, and he sought consolation in building what I see as a memorial in the landscape. That's the part of the landscape we're restoring at the moment.
I'm a great mender. I was never very creative, but I've made model aeroplanes all my life. And if I broke one, I'd spend hours mending it so that you'd never know it was broken. And once I found out, I suppose quite early on when we were here, that we had one of the great parks of England that was broken, it was a very short step to looking forward as to how we might possibly be able to mend it.
We're standing next to where the Palladium pool was. There was about a foot of water in here. There was trees all the way down this edge here, and you couldn't see the bridge because of the trees that were growing up out of the mud in front of it. But if you go back to the 18th century, when the park was at its height, starting in 1748, there was a building that was described as shaped like a Venetian window, a rustic seat of brick shaped like a Venetian window. And the inscription compares the view from there, looking up the vale to the rotunda, with the Vale of Tempe in Thessaly. And it's really crucial to have this idea of the Vale of Tempe in understanding the landscape here, because the Vale of Tempe in Thessaly was the haunt of Apollo and the Muses. And Apollo and the Muses were the source of all of the myths and mythology in Greek legend, and they were metaphors for people to live sort of a virtuous life. This was something that George Littleton, the creator of this part of the park, was really interested in.
When it was planned in the 18th century, there were different parts of the park.
As you came out of the Paradise Lost, you came out in what was also described as the roseate bowers of paradise. So you've got this great contrast that goes from the deep gloom from behind the bridge up into this much more garden-esque environment here, where there was honeysuckle and roses growing up the trees. So a much happier place, if you like. In the back of the temple, there was an uninscribed urn in there, and an uninscribed urn is a symbol of mortality. So even though you come from Paradise Lost into Paradise Regained again, you sat in the temple and there was still an emblem in there of man's mortality. And that was George saying to you, yeah, but don't forget, we're all going the same way. So a really important building, and one of the best features in the landscape, I think.
The people who created this landscape wanted it to play with your senses. And this happens again and again as you move from one area to the next.
Now, one of my favourite visitors who came here was a guy called Joseph Healy. And Joseph Healy wrote two fantastic accounts of the park here. The first one was a description of Hagley. The second one was letters on Hagley. And they're about their whole experience through here. When he enters this piece of the wood, he talks about going into a gloom, and he knows that they're preparing him for the next stage of the journey. But when you came in here, suddenly all your visual range is taken away. You don't know what's around the corner, and you have to start thinking this is like a Little Red Riding Hood, a Hansel and Gretel, or if you're more contemporary, a Blair Witch Project experience. And it was to take away all your visual range, to make you internalise your thought. And if you wanted to, you could carry on through here on little pathways and indulge your gloom. In fact, when James Thomson, the poet, died, William Shenstone and George Littleton were both found in here sitting under different trees crying, so they could indulge in their melancholy and in their gloom.
This area, the Dell, is next on the list for restoration when funds allow. Some of the trees in the park are ancient and absolutely enormous.
Joseph Healy came here in 1771, and he describes this tree in 1771 as being fully grown 100 years ago. So fully grown 1671. So planted 1471. And he says it's been hit by a tempest, and the tempest has blown the top out of the tree. And now 3 new strands have gone, and it's casting shade right the way across the dell. I can read from the other side of this tree that the same happened again about 150 years ago, and it fell out that way. And now it's happened again within the last few years and fallen across the top of here. So what we've got is a lime tree that's pollarding itself. It's throwing its top out and then growing new strands. So the base of this tree, all this root plate behind me, dates back to 1471. But a fantastic specimen tree, and I think one of the best ones in the landscape because of the story attached to it.
On top of the hill above the Valley of Cascades is the rotunda, currently minus its roof.
So this was an early Palladian building, but looked quite primitive because it was all made out of stone. From the rotunda there was a view down to the Palladian bridge, and it was a single view. There was only one view from here. We're standing in sort of an open field now, but this open field would have been a wood pasture, and you were actually governed, your visual sense was governed that you could only have the one view down there. And then further down there was a pathway which had a seat on it, and you looked across a ravine and back up to it. So we were always managing your view, managing your senses as you wandered around the park.
I couldn't see why the park shouldn't be open to the public, and why the public shouldn't be able to share what is one of the great 18th century parks. And so we were very happy to accept help from Natural England and English Heritage on different parts to help us with the restoration.
Dredging the ponds has revealed a whole string of new features.
I found quite a few things in the landscape while I've been doing it here. There was a lot of things that we discovered before I came here, but even using both of those strategies, there's another way that things can come up, and that was just taking the silt out of this pond to make it match the historic map from 1823. There's a promontory behind me, and on there was Shenstone's urn, which is now behind the hall, and there's two feeds that come into it. And we call this the fishtail around this promontory. And the far fishtail was elongated compared to the other one in the map. So we talked to the digger drivers, and I said, I need you to go right the way around that corner to excavate material there. And they went up round the corner eventually, after much convincing. And the 30-ton digger went round there, and he put his bucket in. He felt something underneath the surface. Now, I know all the descriptions of the park. None of them mention that cascade. None of the illustrations that we've got show that cascade. No one knew that cascade was there. But we've actually named this one after the digger driver who found it, because he was so gentle with a 30-ton digger, putting his bucket in, not destroying it at all. And there it is, the Muirhead Cascade. Fantastic.
But dredging is just the first stage of the restoration. There's still a lot to be done while the weather's dry.
We're getting changes going on in the landscape. Still, our understanding of the whole place is changing. You can see that there's been work going on the Palladian Bridge. The voussoirs have been copied, and you can see that the new pieces are in there. We've had a French guy over who's been doing those. There's work going on in sort of all areas of the park at the moment. One of the most interesting things is we've had the rut going on. So everyone's been being distracted pretty much by hearing deer antlers knocking together, and then seeing that animation going on in the landscape. And then this water coming down. So we've had water tipping over all the ponds and filling all the ponds. We've had pumps going. We've had water spilling in from everywhere. And everyone understands why the Seasons was written here now, because it really does show all of that. But they've built on the back of the temple now. And then the beams have been put in over the top of there, which protects the original archaeology. And then there's the space for the temple to go back onto the top. So they're well on the way with there. And beneath the blue sheet over there, the wings have been completed now, and they're just doing the inside rustications on there.
Restoration work on the roof of the rotunda is on hold while new stones are being carved in a workshop, but the paths are being gravelled.
What we're doing now is we're layering on a Forest of Dean gravel on the top. It's supposed to be a 40mm granular mix that once rolled down is going to stand the test of the foot traffic, etc. I already have slight reservations because the deer seem to be making quite a few marks in. This has just been rolled again, but time will tell.
Meanwhile, Joe's been comparing written descriptions of the park with the engravings and early paintings in the house.
When we look at the view up through the vale, there was a description of looking from this viewpoint saying it was like a perfect opera scene. And when we look at this, what we see is it almost looks like the wings coming in of a theatre scene. So all of these things can start sort of informing the ideas that we're giving to English landscape. These two pictures beneath, this is the original painting by Thomas Smith of Derby, the same artist as the view through the Vale. And this is the view from Thomason's Seat. In the painting, you can see the castle, you can see Pope's Seat, which is no longer there, but it gives us an idea of the position of that. And then we've got this staffage, as it's called, in front of there, the peopling of the painting. And you'll see that often this changes through engravings, and you get different editions of engravings. Here we've got another one of the engravings, the same scene. There's a slight amount more detail in the castle, but the staffage on the front has changed, and it's changed outfits because fashions have changed. By combining these with the written descriptions, you get so much more information about the park, and then by walking through the park, you start to understand it a bit more and can pick it all apart. Well, it's the end of November now, and you can see that we've got a brick alcove now built behind the bridge. That'll be the site of the temple. There'll be pillars going in front of there. So there's going to be 4 Ionic columns in twin rows, 2 of them backing onto the temple there. It's not going to be a brick finish. It'll be rendered after, and I presume that they'll then score it so that it looks like ashlar as the rest of the bridge. You can see that that's leapt on, but just behind me here, you can see that the letterboxes, which is where the outfall is now going to disappear to. So once the water height gets up, that's where the water will disappear through into our stilling chamber behind, where we've got some more developments on, and we've actually had water flowing through there now, and mighty fine it looks as well.
The gravelling on the paths is holding out. The next big job is preparing the main dam so the cascade can be rebuilt.
And once we get that built again, we've got our fantastic dry stone waller who's done all the rest of the stuff in the park. He's going to rebuild the cascade, and once that's done, we'll be able to fill the pond with water again, and we'll be able to watch it all start working. And the restoration will start coming to life once this pond's got some water in there.
This whole project is an enormous undertaking costing millions. So what drives Joe Hawkins and Lord Cobham to restore this historic landscape?
It is a huge privilege to actually work with land and to recreate something that was beautiful and inspired people in the 18th century. And if we can just bring it back so that it can inspire a few people in our current century, what a thing to do. I've worked myself in the city all my life, where anything one did was very ephemeral. Suddenly, the things we're doing today, I hope will have some meaning quite a long time after I'm pushing up the odd daisy.
When we switch off from our workaday world, whether you go into your back garden and have a plant that you've just bought from the garden centre in a glass of red, or whether you go and sleep on the beach somewhere, it's the same thing that you're after. It's that tranquility that only nature and being outside can give you. Now, Lord Cobham says to me that he's interested in projects where he fixes something that's broken. My mum tells me that I like to take things apart and understand how they work. So I think that we're like perfect team to be doing this. And I find it fascinating. But the thing that I really enjoy about being in landscape is if I can talk to other people about it, engage them in landscape. This is something that doesn't cost anything. You don't have to go out every week and go and buy a designer label or the latest version of something in order to keep up with everybody else. You just go out there, it doesn't cost anything, and it's always there. And it's really good for in here. It's good for your soul, it's good for your mind. It's been quite a difficult winter. There's been a lot of water down, which has slowed down proceedings a bit, but as you can see, the bridge has really come on. The balusters are on there now. So the wings and virtually everything's complete now. Tomorrow we've got some of the columns arriving, so quite an exciting day tomorrow. The roof's up on there, and the back of the bush shelter, as one of the contractors called it, has now taken its render and looks far more in keeping with the rest of the bridge. But very, very pleased with that.
Lord Cobham's out in the park nearly every day, discussing progress with his team of contractors.
Now it's really accelerating, and we're hoping to finish the Palladian Bridge within the next couple of weeks and the rotunda within the next couple of weeks. So by the end of April, this phase of the work should be pretty much done.
The dry stone walling's looking solid, and Joe's already tested the cascade. The paths, though, have suffered badly in the very wet winter.
The paths have basically washed out. There's so much water coming down off Thompson's lawn, and it's one of the difficulties of the park here, and it's why the park is the shape that it is. Water over thousands, tens of thousands a year has run down these hillsides and has scoured the place out. It's why they built ponds here in the first place, because it was a great catchment area. But what we need to do now is to direct all of that water so it ends up in the pond courses, so we get it coming over the cascade. That's the idea, is to replicate that 18th century thing.
Further up the valley, the contractors have made an intriguing discovery.
There's always a surprise every time you put a digger in here. And so we had to get the archaeologists out again and uncover what was a well-recorded nest of seats, little stone seats.
I don't think you need to put any more soil in it. In the historic descriptions, there was a piece by Joseph Hagley, and Joseph Hagley said, beneath the flowery scoop of the rambling dell, under the laurel grove, a grotesque knot of seats, as if hewn from a natural scar of rock, stood in modest simplicity. And I always tried to apply it to the 3 alcoves we've got over there, but obviously this is what it is now. So this is the last sort of great mystery of the grotto area put to bed. Great discovery. And a nightmare for us, because now we're going to have to excavate all of this area here and find out exactly what the extent of it and where it gets to. But as an 18th century feature, it's absolutely fascinating.
Above these seats, the dam which creates Scout Pond has been reinforced.
What we've done now is we've built a significant structure on the front of the dam, which is going to take all of the water, bring it all down and connect up with the old culverts down there. So it's not going to be visible. But we know that the dam is going to stand up for the next 200 years while people come and wander around the landscape and understand what they were doing in the 18th century. But we've built it with better structure than they did in the Georgian period. You can see that the rotunda is almost nearing completion. We've just got 2 more courses to go on the top. I think that by next week the scaffold will be coming down, and it's looking fantastic. I've been up there a few times and taken photos. It's really nice to watch it sort of gradually pull together. They cut all the stone out at a factory and then brought it all in. They're just basically piecing that together like a jigsaw. But I'm looking forward to having my park back. It's always difficult having contractors in, and I've got to say that it's been fairly stressful, probably a little bit greyer, but they've done a fantastic job. But it's really starting to come together. So the next couple of years will help everything just green back over again, and it's going to be one of the supreme parks in Britain.
With the highest lake, Scout Pond, now full of water again, the new dam has disappeared from view. The park is full of spring blossom. The roar of the contractors' diggers has given way to the sound of running water everywhere. The rotunda has finally shed its curtain of scaffolding.
Of course, the rotunda, and the roof in particular, is the most fantastic piece of work. When you think of the amount of time that is taken to create a hemisphere of stone, and each one of those stones has to be carved in about 3 different dimensions. And of course, with the rotunda here, you tend to see the full genius of the park, and that you've got this wonderful long view down to the Palladian Bridge down at the bottom. And that is the view that was always taken in the 18th century prints.
The ionic columns are all in place, twin rows of 4. Tetra-style columns, I believe that they're called, and they're made out of southern yellow pine, which isn't actually a tree, it's a whole classification of trees, and it's been used because it's quite a stable timber. They're painted white because the original plan that we've got from the Marquis de Martinet's collection shows that they're white on there, so they'll be continually painted, rendering the ceilings. And then what we've got next week is, once the rest of the scaffolding's down, they'll put all the steps in, so the treads and risers are just behind me here. You see, ready to go in for the steps to go up there. But I stood up there last night and watched the clouds moving about and the sunshine lighting up the rotunda and then closing it down, and watching the light moving up and down the vale, and it looks absolutely fantastic.
The fishtail at the head of Scout Pond also looks good, with water trickling over the Muirhead Cascade, named after the digger driver who unearthed it. Shenstone's urn has also been put back in its original place.
William Shenstone was a poet at the neighbouring landscape of the Lysones, and when this garden came to its fame, most of the visitors who came here went to see Shenstone's garden as well, which was a celebrated ferme ornée, smaller landscape than this. And one of the things about Shenstone's urn, it was put in this prominent place in the landscape, but had to be hidden as well. We surrounded it with oak trees, and the oak trees around it, so that eventually their boughs will come down over the top of it. But they thought that Shenstone wanted to be recognised as this shepherd poet who was just tending his landscape, and he likes to have this catalogue of the landed gentry who go there. So there's quite a significance about it being in a prominent place, slightly obscured, but still prominent.
New drainage has been fitted beside some of the paths to channel the rainwater off the lawns and into the ponds. And Joe's had a new deer fence built by the wilderness area to protect the young shrubs and plants. It'll allow this area to become a melancholy garden where you can indulge your gloom once again. And work is underway in the Dell area too.
Joe, we're losing the water in the cascade coming down just to the last little bit before it reaches the confluence where it joins with the water coming down from this side.
Yeah, it'll be easy enough for us to dig some of the bank away there so we can watch the water coming down all the way along, but we'll have to do it on this side because obviously the water should go through where the collapsed culvert is over there and down the original cascade.
I got you.
But we won't affect any of the archaeology if we pull away from this side, so we can still reveal it while we consider our next movement on the...
Okay. I think that'll look great just to do that, because then you get the flow the whole way down through.
Absolutely, absolutely.
For now, the landscape just needs time to recover and green over again. There are ambitious plans for a new visitor centre.
Well, the visitor centre will take about a year to build, and we've got some more detailed finalisation to do on the drawings and so on. So we won't finish it realistically until the winter next year. So I wouldn't expect it to be fully open to the public until the beginning of 2016.
And the next phase will be to restore other parts of this landscape.
We've got the major bit of the restoration done, and we'll continue to work on both the Poet's Walk and the Hermitage Wood and the rest as and when we've got time to do it, but we'll do that within the estate.
With commanding views over the Malvern Hills and across to Wales and Shropshire, Hagley has one of England's most spectacular settings. After decades when it remained a well-kept secret tucked away from public view, Lord Cobham's dream to share his stunning birthright with everyone is now being realised. Finally, the Palladian Bridge has been finished. The opening phase of the Hagley Park restoration is complete.
Finally, the contractors have gone. Peace reigns in the park once more, and we're starting to get all the nice details that the garden landscape gives you again. One of my favourites on the Palladian Bridge there, you can just see that light reflecting underneath the eaves. These are the bits of poetry that they would have really enjoyed back in the day. So here's the bridge finished now with its wooden columns, the steps are on there. We're just letting all the landscape recover now. The scars are starting to disappear. It's looking absolutely wonderful.
This is where the new visitor centre will be built. Other parts of the landscape will be next. Poets Walk and Hermitage Woods.
While we're letting the rest of the landscape recover, this last week we've been working on Pope's Walk or Poets Walk, and this is where Pope's urn stood. The plinth's still there, you can just about make out there was an inscription on there, and here we have the urn lying on the ground, unfortunately broken away. But this one will be recarved eventually, and we'll have a new replica urn on top of there to Alexander Pope. This is Hermitage Wood, but you can see it's really congested with trees. Now a lot of these were put in as a timber crop, these conifers, and the conifers need to be taken out. There are some important old trees in here, some veteran trees, and the veteran trees you have to be careful pruning around them, and what they call halo pruning, where you take out gradually so the tree gets used to having a new environment.
It's the end of the roller coaster first phase for the estate, but there's plenty more to do.
I don't think we're ever going to stop working in the landscape here. It's certainly going to see me out. I think it looks incredible. We've had the contractors have done great work in the Cascade and the Palladian Bridge and the Rotunda. They look phenomenal, and they're these sort of little features, architectural features, the embellishment of nature with art. The nature is just being allowed to recover now. Just the history and the rich history of this landscape. When people start to worry about their national identity disappearing, if you've got places like this where people can come to, this celebrates Englishness and the history of Englishness.